So welcome everyone, Eddie Roberts to the show 885 FM, the SoCal Sound at home interviews, Deeper Grooves podcast. Super excited to have not only the man, the myth, the legend, guitarist, producer, record label owner, but also just an amazing individual. Welcome, Eddie.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, I mean, super excited to be able to talk to you. I know that your group, the New Master Sounds, has a new album that just came out in September. So we'll start off talking about that. The latest record, The Doppler Effect, which we're going to definitely do a Deeper Grooves whole show to Color Red, including playing one of the singles from that album. But as you were kind of creating it, what inspired you to make this new record?
Well, the main part was the fact that I helped build a studio in Iceland on a place called Doppler Farm, which is where the name Doppler Effect comes from. And so about a year ago, well, I guess it was like July 2021, I got flown out to check out this property. And, you know, these guys wanted to build a studio there because they owned land up there, right on the north coast of Iceland. Nothing between you and the North Pole, just a very cold sea. And I was like, sure, if you want to build a studio here, like, why not? So I helped them do that. And then I proposed that I got the Master Sounds there for the first recording for, you know, to kind of test it all out. And so that's what happened. And it was, also, I hadn't been able to even see the Master Sounds, the rest of the guys, because two of them live in the UK, one lives in Spain. And at that time, they weren't even allowing British residents into the US because it was still, you know, kind of caught up under that lockdown law. So I hadn't seen the guys since January 2020 when we said goodbye in Tokyo Airport. And then the whole world collapsed. And then there we are in Iceland in November 2021, you know, about 18 months later. So it was pretty exciting to see the guys again. It was exciting to be on the north coast of Iceland in this brand new studio. It was so fresh that the tape machine didn't even show up for the first 4 days of the recording. So it was, you know, we were literally plugging stuff in and testing it and then recording. So it was quite a fun experience.
Yeah, that's always amazing to me how like there's so much that goes into a record that the average listener has no concept, no clue, no idea of, just not only the sweat equity, but, you know, building a studio and those little gremlins that are in there, or things that happen.
Yeah, we definitely found some gremlins. I think that it was a C3 Hammond organ, and I think it caught fire at one point. Yeah. All sorts of things like that. And, you know, so then we got this Fender Rhodes shipped over from the UK, and like half of the keys didn't work, so they had to get fixed. And it was like, yeah, there was all sorts of stuff going on. But you know, we had a good amount of time there. We had like 10 days there, and it was such a beautiful location. And you know, we were happy to be there, happy to be together, and happy to be making music. So it was cool.
And so when you're doing track selection or building the song set list, etc., like, is it collaborative? Is it mostly you? Like, what's the kind of writing process for your group?
We all kind of show up with some very, you know, sketchy ideas. You know, nothing fully formed. You know, and we do that on purpose because really we found that there's no point writing a whole song and then show it up, because then it'll just get picked apart and it'll just change so much anyway. So the better way to do it for us was just to, you know, you come up with a couple of ideas, you know, sing them in your phone, whatever, however you want to do it, and then show up, and then we kind of develop them all together. And you know, I have the kind of final say. Everyone kind of lets me, you know, dictate where it goes, because they've given up trying to fight me on it. So, you know, I mean, there's 4 guys with 4 different ideas, but it's like ultimately I always win. So they are, after 23 years, then, they don't fight me anymore. So, so we kind of have this, we'll start with an idea and then we'll go, okay, let's do this and let's take it there. Let's turn it into a vocal tune, or let's, have an organ melody. And we just kind of develop it in the room. And, I only usually spend a couple of hours developing a tune and then start doing takes, and then listening back, and you think, okay, I dig this. This is great how it is. Or, maybe sometimes you'll say, let's come back tomorrow and attack it again and see if something better comes out, So very organic process, and that's how we've always done it. And I think this is our 17th album or something. So try and test.
Prolific for sure. I mean, over 20 years of producing under your belt as well. Now, when you're talking about the songs that are on the album, every parent, you would like to say you love all your children the best, but it's not true. So is there a certain song that stands out in your mind in the pack that's like, wow, that really solidified what this Doppler Effect album is?
I think my favorite is probably High on the Mountain. And it kind of captures a little something that I was after on that. And I wrote the music for it, or like I said, the idea for it. And then the lyrical process was kind of between Lamar and Joe, and Joe's wife, who's a singer, and she was there joining him as well. So they kind of all like huddled together and came up with the lyrics and things like that. And you'll find that the High on the Mountain isn't even sung in the tune, but it's like, we're surrounded by these beautiful snow-capped mountains, and it was, it's kind of, it summed up the feeling and the view. And then some of the emotion of the track reflects that, but it doesn't actually say that lyric in the whole tune. And I kind of, I kind of like that sometimes when it's not that obvious, when the title of the song isn't even sung,
Excellent. Yeah, when I heard it, now that you mention it, for some reason my mind went to a different type of high on the mountain. So I guess have that, that dichotomy.
Kind of hard to get hold of in Iceland, though.
Yeah, well, Iceland is very green, I hear, and Greenland is very icy. So.
But not in November or past any time past October. I think it was. We were in November 2 weeks, and most of the time it was snow. It was snow everywhere. There was a couple of days that the snow melted and we had a little bit of green, but if you want the green Iceland, you go in the summer, but it is a lot of snow. I went back to the same studio in January with George Porter Jr., and I don't think he's given me yet. It was so cold. And he's like, I'm from New Orleans. What am I doing here? So, yeah.
Well, then, and you were asked to help them create their studio because you have an amazing studio as well in Denver now.
Yeah, I mean, it's our studio in Denver sounds good, put it that way. I wouldn't call it an amazing studio. I remember someone was writing a press release at one point about it, and they're like, state-of-the-art studio. I was like, no, complete reverse. It's more like the Gabe from Daptone, shitty is pretty quote, we use a 388 tape machine, and we've got the old Master Sounds backline in the basement of a single family home, and then people stay in the house. Bands stay at the house when they're coming through, so nobody actually lives there. So it's a cool setup, and it's a funky house as well. It's like, I don't know, I think there was some woman that lived there before. I never met the people we bought it off. It had been on the market for a while, and I think she used to work for the CIA or something. And then the guy used to build elevators, and the whole house is like really strange. There's some really strange things in the different rooms, and including a bathroom that's completely mirror tiled. I don't know who wants to look at themselves from so many angles when they're sitting on the toilet, but hey. I'm kind of glad I didn't meet these people. So it's a bit of a weird, funky spot, but it sounds great, and it's very conducive to making good music. On the flip side, the studio in Iceland is like about as beautiful and high end as you possibly can get. We have to, and you know, the MCI tape machines, the Chris Mara refurbishes. We've got a 16-track 2-inch, 24-track 2-inch, and a 1-inch 2-track, or maybe it's a half-inch 2-track. A new API desk, like the analog desk, and it's a beautiful setup in a beautiful location, roaring log fire, manned by some people who are like constantly feeding you and like putting logs on the fire, and it's just a completely different, opposite experience to what you'd get in our Denver studio.
There's that difference in different places, but a lot of the records that we listen to and that we love were done in just a little box.
Yeah. So Shake It which was our previous record, was done at the Denver studio, and it was one of the first. I think it was the first album we actually recorded there, and everybody stayed upstairs, and so we still had this kind of residential vibe about it because they were in from Europe anyway. And then this one was done in this luxury setting. So I can't hear the difference myself. It'd be interesting for other people to kind of like A/B the records, and it's like, can you tell this was done in a shitty place and this was done in a fancy place?
Yeah. No, that's one way to go about it on the street.
Yeah.
Blind listening test. Does it sound like it was in a shitty place? So then necessity is the mother of invention. Is that part of the reason that you wanted to start Color Red and have a label for yourself and your music, but then obviously lots of great funk, soul, jazz acts? What kind of made you want to go that route?
Well, so I'd moved to Denver in 2015. I moved to America in 2010. Lived in San Francisco for 3 years, New Orleans for 2 years, then ended up in Denver. And I just saw this really rich music scene going on. So much music happening every night, people traveling through every day and every night, and nobody capturing it. There was no labels at all really that I could find, or and so I just realized that this, all this amazing energy that was going on just wasn't being captured, and it wasn't being shown to the rest of the world. Everyone's like, Denver, like, why are you in Denver? And I think when people come here, they kind of go, oh shit, okay, this is happening. I mean, every night of the week there's like between 5 and 10 venues with a world-class acts happening, anything from a 150 cap room to Red Rocks at 10,000. It's just like, it's just insane the amount of music that's going on. And it's a very supportive environment as well. A lot of the kind of promoters and everything, everyone's helping the native Coloradans kind of get up as well, and kind of opening for all these touring acts and things like that. So it's kind of like, it's just a really supportive scene. And I saw all this, and I was like, well, it takes the Welshman to come to Denver and kind of decide to set up the label. And Color Red, which comes from Colorado, which comes from Color Rojo, which is the original Spanish name of the river, I think it was. So yeah, that was the kind of the initial idea. I also realized I had the Master Sounds backline sitting in a storage unit in New Orleans going moldy, so I got that up from New Orleans up to here, stuck some mics around it, and like I said, put it in this basement of this house, and we just started making music, I guess, in March 2018, and then we launched the label August 2018, and then we've released at least one track every week since launch in August 2018. So.
Excellent. Now, it's a little bit different talking to someone with such an illustrious and prolific career, of just the sheer amount of output that you've done. So we won't have time to go through 17 albums, but if you could pick the top 3 from your catalog, say, for the new Master Sounds, and you've done other projects outside of that, your own projects, solo projects, a lot of collaborations, but like, what would be, I guess, your top 3 albums?
I think This Is What We Do. It was probably my favorite early Master Sounds album. I think that was our third one. Yeah, I think it was the third. And it meant a lot to me because I was going through something, and it was a bit of a sticking the middle finger up to someone saying,
Nice.
this is what we do. Or rather, this is what I do. Don't make me do something else. But yeah, and then, the newest album you always do, it does become your favorite, certainly for a while. So right now, Death Fright is my favorite album of the Master Sounds catalog, just because it's fresh and it represents where I am now, and and also, we recorded it in November, so last November. So listening to it takes me right back there as well, and it's still kind of fresh. And I've actually only managed to do 4 shows with the Master Sounds since the album was made, just because we're still spread out over the world. And it's, we did 2 in Madrid a couple of weeks ago. I got a couple in the UK coming up in end of October. So yeah, so it's still a kind of good feeling about it around that. And then I'm not sure what my favorite. I kind of did this jazz album called Roughneck. I love the name anymore because it means something different in America, but it's called Roughneck because I had this friend, and when people used to ask him about me, he's like, he's not like this smooth jazz guitar player. He's just like, it's like a roughneck, like, and that's what the album, the title got called. But it's kind of like, it was inspired by that whole, the Saint Germain album, Tourist, that came out so long ago now, even though it still sounds so fresh. So I was kind of inspired by that kind of jazz house crossover, but doing it organically, and I kind of still looping it up, but it sounds like a band. And I'm still really proud of that album, and that's under my name.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen some of your solo stuff and tons of the records, and you guys have just, in general, for not just you but all your acts and Color Red, just some amazing vinyl. So people definitely go support actual phonetic. Even if you can't play it, at least it's a showpiece to have, for sure.
Yeah.
Now every superhero has origin stories. So for you, there's 2 origins. There's obviously you as the musician and the person, but then also how you put your group together. Obviously, you probably had personnel changes in 17 albums, but the core group. So like, how did you kind of get into music essentially, and then how did that lead to eventually New Master Sounds?
Well, it's a long story because I'm 51 now, so we won't cover all the years. But yeah, started at 10 in Wales and Swansea, where I was born and raised. Went to music school at 18 in Leeds in the north of England, and then and that was the only non-classical music school in the UK. So anyone who was kind of into jazz or any jazz-related music, they all came to that one city. So there was just a wealth of players, and there was a bunch of DJs putting on club nights and playing funk and soul, rare groove, all that stuff. So I kind of just got immersed into that world. DJs were making me mixtapes, and they, because they heard the way I played, and they were like, "Oh, you should check out Grant Green." I'd never heard Grant Green until I went there. Or you're like, "You should check out George Benson. You should check out Wes." So they're making all these tapes, and then and I remember someone approached me saying, "Do you want to be in a band doing Meters covers?" And I was like, "Yeah, who are the Meters?" And he gave me a mixtape. It's like, so that was kind of it back then, and we're talking early 90s at that point. And then various groups were actually, the Master Sounds I started with the drummer Simon and 2 different guys, and that lasted about 2 years, and that was like 96, around that time. And then we had a break, and then in 99 there was this new club opening, and they wanted me to put a band together to play every Friday night. So I got with Simon and the 2 other guys, Pete Shand, this bass player, he'd been like the bit of the local legend. He was 10 years older than us, and we didn't even think he'd want to be in a band with us. We were like, well, we could ask Pete, but he'll probably say no. And he said yes, and so he joined the band. And then so me, Simon, and Pete have been together since 99. And then we had the original organ player, Bob Birch. He was in the band until I think till we came to America for the first time, and then he's like, "All right, I'm out." It wasn't so much that he just didn't want to leave home so much, and
Yeah.
but so he left the band, and Joe Tadden joined the band. So Joe's been in for nearly, well, let's say 18 years as it is, or 17 years. So I it's pretty much the same lineup from the beginning, and certainly me, Simon, and Pete. And then Joe with 17 years under the belt. I don't think you really call him the new guy anymore.
And so from those kind of bands that you were turned into the mixtapes, do you consider them to be your main influences, or do you have other influences?
No, that was the main influence. And it was really kind of like, I was influenced by this scene that was going on, this kind of DJ-led scene, where it wasn't, exactly emulating one artist or just inspired by the other artist. It was just like this whole scene, and we were just in these clubs that were just happening like 3 or 4 nights a week, just hanging out, DJs playing all this music. And I think the whole sound and the whole scene really inspired me. And then I started getting to know some of the US guys towards the mid to late 90s. I met the Grey Boy All Stars in 95 when the first show they played in Europe, I opened for them. And then all the Daptone, or to Desco at the beginning. And then I used to pick them up in my old vintage car from the airport and drive them around the UK. And I kind of knew those guys back then. And so then we all started inspiring each other and influencing each other, like sonically, I think, on production and things like that. And so there's kind of this whole worldwide network of people doing very similar things around the same time. And it was exciting sharing it with each other, playing on tours together, and just influencing each other.
Well, you have influenced and worked with a ton of people, collaborating with Beaters, Headhunters, Lettuce, Soul Live, Galactic, Orgone, who I love, Sergio and that group, Kenny Dope, Quantic. I've heard some stuff from your label from them, and just Playboy All Stars you mentioned, Night Soul Sounds, West Coast Sounds. It's just a whole laundry list of people. But so is there any kind of 1 or 2 collaborations where you're like, wow, I really enjoyed kind of connecting with them? And is there any collaboration you'd like to have in the future with someone?
Yeah, the Quantic stuff is really fun. I mean, he's an old pal. I've known him, because he's also British, and I think he must have been. I remember it was Quantic Soul Orchestra opened for us at the Brighton Jazz Bar, and he must have been like 21 or something, and he was so young, and so we knew each other from then for years, and then he kind of disappeared because he moved to Colombia and just like went off the radar. And then I ended up in the US, and then he ended up in the US. And so we reconnected, and it's like, and we'd always talked about, every time we'd see each other in the early days, we'd talk about doing stuff together, and then we never did. And we all kind of went off on our different paths. So it was really nice to come back and finally kind of actually do something together. And just there's a long friendship there, which is really nice. And it's always, hey, making music with your friends, what's better? It's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, I nerd out on it. I was happy to see Quantic on your label and hear that stuff, to be able to play it on the show. I remember learning about Quantic with True Thoughts, his DJ stuff, Into the Orchestra, Alice Russell singing with them, the Spanky Wilson album and all that stuff. So, and then his Cumbia stuff later. So I was glad to see he resurfaced. I know I had heard he'd been in South America and then I guess back to the States. So it all comes, I guess, full circle. But is there any kind of collaboration or something if you waved a magic wand, you want to do, you haven't done someone, you're like, I would love to have that?
There's one that I'm working on right now, and it's actually with Neil Sugarman, who from Daptone, of course, one of the founders of Daptone, and then the horn section leader or band leader, really, of Sharon Jones. And we, again, like I said, I was picking him up in my old car from the late 90s, and and I think we're going to go to Iceland to make a record there, because he's living in Zurich. So it's kind of like, it's a halfway point for both of us. So we're planning that. We're trying to figure out dates that work for both of us right now. So that's going to happen. And like I said, I just did a record with George Porter Jr., which I'm still kind of working on. We're having guest vocals added onto that album, kind of as you speak. So that's a pretty exciting one. I mean, hey, you get to play with your heroes, your funk heroes. So
yeah, it's exciting to see that circle of someone handing you a mixtape saying, "Do you want to play Meters covers?" to get
yeah,
into the Meters
yeah,
eventually.
yeah. No, I had the amazing pleasure of playing with both George and Zig, with myself and John Medeski. That was the playing the Meters songs. We did
Nice.
3 shows in Colorado with that. That was pretty much bucket list right there.
I can imagine. I mean, Majeski is no sub, man.
Yeah.
He's got some great effects and pedals and those stuff that no one is thinking about. And obviously Medeski, Martin, Wood, and Schofield as well. So then I guess what do you consider or how do you quantify your genre? Because it's very hard sometimes to pigeonhole a musician into kind of one thing, but what do you consider your sound to be?
Yeah, it is hard, and people, when people ask you, and it all depends on where they're coming from. That's it. That's what I always found. I mean, really, to break it right down, it's like I either play jazzy funk or funky jazz, and it depends which way you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I like to think that I've fooled around with different genres a bit more now, especially over the last few years, and especially with the production side. I mean, I feel I've been messing around with similar recording techniques, but then with completely different genres. So like kind of like bluegrass or like kind of southern country, funky country stuff, but then doing it to tape, and then it sounds really cool. And it's like just it doesn't sound like some awful modern country music, But so I feel like, I mean, I was a musical snob for years and years. I mean, that's kind of how you hone your skills. It's like, if it was past 74, I was like, ugh, no, awful. Oh, get that away from me, Yeah, you play that in my presence. And now I just like I like all sorts, and it comes with age and experience and just broadening one's horizon. But I had to be a purist at the beginning, otherwise I wouldn't play the way I play.
For sure. I had a lot of people on the podcast that are curious, about that 74 period or even earlier, that 68 to 71 period. But I mean, a lot of great repertoire within those, finite years for sure. Totally. And I like how you had mentioned about bluegrass and country funk. We did an episode of country funk highlighting a lot of the volumes done by Light the Attic Records, which I had never even known about country funk really until the spotlight on it.
Right. Now there's some great music from all over the world, really,
Well, I think soul is really that connection, because any genre can have soul. It's more about the feeling and the transference of feeling. And so when you're playing, do you prefer, I guess, you wear many hats. So do you prefer more on the playing side with guitar, etc., or do you prefer the producing side, or do you prefer, I guess, the label side? Or does it matter depending on what space you're in?
Yeah, I mean, right now, because obviously we couldn't play for the last 2 years, but prior to that, I was a bit burnt out with the road. After many years of 200 plus shows a year. So as kind of unnerving and nerve-wracking as it was when everything started shutting down, all my work was getting canceled. In one way, I was like, oh wow, I get to have a break at last. and it gave me more time to focus on the label, which was really great. But now that things are opening up and I'm working so hard on the label, now when I get to go play, I'm like, oh, what? I get to play the guitar again. And so it's kind of like given this new, and again, over the lockdown, a lot of the shows we did, you could only use people that were in your town. So it would be your friends that you'd play with. And so suddenly I'm like getting hired to play someone's backyard just with a couple of my friends. And I was like, oh, this is nice. This, I'm not trying to sell tickets anymore. I'm not loading into a van or loading into a tour bus and going on the road for weeks. It's just, it kind of brought the joy back in playing and just, playing with low pressure, just playing with my friends. And I feel like that's kind of like kept with me. So I think getting that balance at this point in my career is just, the balance of the business side and the enjoyment of playing, and then producing music that's it's unfamiliar to me, that's becoming familiar to me, and the excitement of that.
Excellent, excellent. So then, as we start to wrap up the interview and the podcast, I always ask a few rapid fire questions to our luminaries for the next generation of musicians, because we eventually need more new people to come out. So what would you tell a newbie starting out today, whether they want to play or produce or start a label? Like, what advice, if you could go back to your younger self, what would you give a newbie today?
Don't overthink it. Get out there and do it. Put records out. I learned from listening to my records in clubs and going, there's no bass on that track. I need to put bass on the next time I mix a track, So I kind of I literally learned my mixing from listening to it once it was already released. So, don't overthink it and just go for it.
Love it. And that is good advice for sure, because you learn by doing, and you put what you learn into the next thing for sure. So then when it's all said and done and you're still a young man, as Tower of Power said, what do you want your legacy, Eddie, to be? At the end of the day, at the final hour, what do you want people to remember the most?
I think I want you to, when you put funk into a search engine, I want my name to come up.
Yes. I love it. Like, Google me, funk. First page.
It doesn't matter if it's like, it's a top 100, it would be fine with me,
Well, I believe that is definitely possible in all of those segments, from the playing side, album side, producing side, label side. Your name is going to show up somewhere, I believe, for sure. And so then what's next for you?
A lot of music coming out, and we'll see about touring. It's not particularly looking on the cards. I'm doing little runs here and there, and bit of Europe with the Master Sounds. It'd be nice to get the Master Sounds back out here, but just building this label and just finding great music and getting it out to the world.
Excellent. And that's no small feat. And definitely people, the artists need labels to gravitate to, and you're definitely one of the top, I would say 5 within that genre space doing that. So that's great. And who's to say it could be number 1? I didn't necessarily weight an average in there, but I think you're definitely one of the ones that I have at the top of mind for sure. And so then how can people find you online? Where should we point people to go from this interview?
color-red.com is the easiest place to find us. Or, I actually really like our Color Red Spotify playlist. So every track that we put out every week goes on that playlist, and now that's it's been building up over 4 years. So if you want to get a good idea and understanding of the breadth of the label and the sounds and everything, that's a great place to go to.
Yeah, I mean, I have been on it for sure. Love Spotify, love streaming. Again, it is a lot on vinyl, so go to the website first and check that out if you're on phone.
Why the vinyl? Yeah, support music for sure.
Yes.
You're not going to support it by listening to Spotify, but
Yeah.
We need it all.
Exactly. We made it on machines so that people could go and listen to degraded MP3s on very bad headphones.
There you go.
And so, Eddie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your label. Thank you to just not only being an amazing person, amazing musician, producer, player, label owner, but just allowing a space for other people to be able to broadcast their music through your label, turning us on to new artists, and continuing to progress. A lot of people could rest at 51 on their laurels. I'm like, I've done a lot, but you're still doing it. And 4 years at a label, as much output as you guys have done, it's like exponential growth. So kudos to you. So to everybody, go check out Eddie Roberts' solo stuff. Check out the new Master Sounds, their new record, The Doppler Effect, that's out now. This is 88.5 The SoCal Sound, at-home interviews, Deeper Grooves podcast. Eddie, any final remarks before we go?
No, just thanks for having me on, and I look forward to working with you specifically.
Yes, and I look forward to working with you. So we're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Teamwork makes the dream work. We will talk to you soon. Get the links back to your team, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
Bye.